Slightly later than normal manufacturing hub. If you guys are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you are new here, you won't know the first couple of minutes that I have are just a couple of community comments as I say, as we allow everyone to go ahead and get into the room. I will make note, Karim is here. Karim is above me. Wave to everyone, Karim. Perfect. Karim has guest hosted with us. If you don't know him, he is generally the person that makes everything we do look good. If Karim wasn't here, the entire manufacturing hub would basically look like paint by numbers, or we've just drawn everything in MS Paint. So Karim has graciously accepted the guest hosting responsibilities today. We are super happy to have him. We're talking all about data-driven sustainability, IIoT with a purpose. Dave is going to come introduce that in just a couple of moments. And then if you guys, as we go through, have any questions on Phoenix Contact, on IIoT, on data-driven sustainability, just kind of random things as they come up. We love those questions, and we do our very best in order to make sure that those questions get answered as we go on through. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and kick it off. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Manufacturing Hub. I am Dave. This guy up here is Karim, a little bit different than normal. We are talking about data-driven sustainability. Again, we want to thank Phoenix Contact for sponsoring this episode. We want to introduce our special guest, Dave Eifert of Phoenix Contact. Dave, thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to finally be a guest on this show. I've watched it, I've listened to it, I've heard a lot about it. So good to be here.
Absolutely. I told this to a number of guests. I don't know how we have managed to go so many episodes without getting you on, and so I'm happy that we can rectify that previous wrong. Would you mind giving everyone a little bit of background, kind of introduction to who you are and how you have wound up in this space chatting with us?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I like the work you guys do. And Dave Eifert, I am the Senior Business Development Manager for IIoT at Phoenix Contact USA. I've been doing that for like 18 or 24 months, depending on how official you want to be about it. Prior to that, I ran our water wastewater vertical market for about 10 years or so. And then before that, I was involved in automation, sales, and marketing, and at Phoenix Contact. And then prior to that, I did similar roles with other companies like Johnson Controls, Eaton Corporation, Westinghouse back before that. So I'm starting to date myself. I went to college at Clarkson University up in New York State. Got an interdisciplinary engineering and a management degree, which I think has been really a good platform on which to pursue all this other stuff, because I've always been at the nexus of kind of business and the technology that enables that to be more efficient. And that's really what we're talking about here today. And it's kind of, I think, really, we all have heard of Industry 4.0, and it's a real thing, as you guys are well aware, and your audiences. But a lot of people were pretty skeptical about that, what it really meant, what it would bring us, how it would benefit people and companies. And same thing with sustainability and with with industrial Internet of Things and IoT in general. So a lot of these different terms sounded like buzzwords. They have been buzzwords. They've kind of fallen in and out of favor. But I believe that now today we're at a place where we can actually derive a lot of value out of these different concepts and make them more than just concepts, but actually tools that can benefit a business and their outcomes.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm looking to jump into that a little bit more. But I have one question about all of the previous things you were doing. So I was at a
Mhm.
trade show a long time ago. Eaton was there. They always had the best toys. Were you working with Eaton when they had that Orange County chopper bike, and there was a Hummer that they drug around to all
I
of
was
the
not.
trade shows?
Nope.
No,
They
I
waited till I got out of there before they debuted all the cool stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. They for the longest period of time, especially the power division, always had
Yes.
the well, certainly the most expensive toys. Now
Hmm.
we've got robots and all of these other crazy things that we drag to trade shows. Before that, they had motorcycles and Hummers painted with very like late '90s, early 2000s blue lightning bolts,
Oh.
which are very memorable.
Yes, that was.
But
I think that was probably in a reaction to Schneider with their Squirty
okay.
brand that had a lot of NASCAR sponsorships, and they would drag NASCARs
Okay.
around to different events. And I think Eaton decided, hey, we got to one up them in some fashion. Just a guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Karim, biggest NASCAR fan on the stream right here. No,
but
that is what?
I saw, I saw, like, I was on in software conferences, and there's always the biggest booth. They always bring a Lamborghini or Ferrari, and yeah, it always works. I think
Mhm.
it's mostly the best attraction that I've ever seen. So smart move.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you led us up. You talked about a bunch of words, Industry 4.0, IIoT. You've been heading the IIoT group as I think you said senior product manager at Phoenix for the last coming up on 2 years at this point. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, we started hearing about data driven sustainability, which is kind of been described to me as IIoT with a purpose. And I'm like, I love this. But I would imagine it's a little bit more than that fairly simple statement. Dave, would you mind kind of walking us through what data driven sustainability is, please?
Well, absolutely. My first encounter with the term sustainability and the concepts therein were when I was at Johnson Controls, and that started about 20 years ago, 2003. And back then, there was a term called the triple bottom line that actually
Mm-hmm.
had been coined probably in the mid 90s and really started catching some traction late 90s, early 2000s. And it kind of has fizzled out since then. And I think it's a little bit of a shame because I think it was pretty instructive in that it was a different way of thinking about corporations and their mission and their bottom line. And it's not just purely profit driven. They could have all the profits in the world that you want, but if you did it with a short-term focus without considering the community and the ecology, the environment, that it would be short-lived because you'd exhaust your natural resources, or you'd pollute, or you would burn your employees out, or whatever the case might be. So now that I think it may have fallen out of favor because it was really difficult to measure the non-financial aspects of the triple bottom line. Anyhow, so I think sustainability kind of popped its head up quite a bit early 2000s and kind of languished a little bit. I think really it's really surging now. And I believe that there's a lot of legislation, regulations in Europe, and a lot of kind of customer sentiment in the United States and rest of the world to embrace doing things more sustainably. And what that means to me is that you're operating in a manner in which you could operate indefinitely. You're not going to exhaust resources. You're not going to pollute to the extent that things aren't, livable. You're trying to do things with the entire life cycle, not just of a product, but of an enterprise in view. And so it's a noble concept, but frankly, one that I think, as an evolved society, we should be embarking on. I think the only excuse to not act in a sustainable manner is when you're in a bootstrap mode, trying to get something started up. Let's say it's an emergency and you got to burn some tires just to stay warm for the night so you can make it the next day. In those cases, obviously, you gotta do what you got to do. But once we've gotten to the point where we have a nice stable society and civilization, I think it behooves us to look forward to future generations and make sure we ensure that it's a good community, a good environment for them as well. And I think we can do that. Now, sounds high-minded. It is high-minded. Our company, about 3 years ago, announced what we called the All Electric Society as an initiative, our guiding North Star, but it's really just around the whole concept of sustainability, decarbonization, et cetera. So that's kind of what we're all aligned towards right now. And out of that, we in the US kind of coined the term data driven sustainability because we quickly came to the realization that, yes, it's a high minded ideal and it's something worth pursuing, the sustainability concept, decarbonization, et cetera. But what are the actual concrete steps you can take to get there? And you need data, just like we're talking about with Industry 4.0 or IIoT or digitalization. The fundamental trading unit of currency is data. And how do you effectively get the right data at the right time in the right context to make a meaningful, impactful decision and inform you to show you you're going the right direction. And that's really what it's all about at its essence. And I think it plays in well to dispel some of the issues we've had around IIoT or Industry 4.0 or some of these buzzwords over the last 5 years is that they came flashing out with great flourish and promise, and then in some cases there wasn't much to back it up, or in other cases they were misapplied or maybe applied maybe too wide and not deeply enough, or in some fashion that it just didn't take. So I think now we're past that trough of disillusionment, if I may use that term,
Mhm.
and we're to the point where it's people are saying, okay, how do we actually truly get to the brass tacks and make some of this stuff work? And I'm gratified to see we're finally approaching that point where people are actually, practitioners, pardon me, making the stuff actually work.
Absolutely,
Interesting.
absolutely. I guess I want to talk a bit more on that sustainability part, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like I guess I like where you're coming from. I feel like good organizations who want to keep and retain good employees want to be sustainable, not just for so people can continue to work and live in a place, but so that there is that hope and talk of work life balance and everything else
Yes.
along along those lines. And then also, sustainability to the environment. I guess I want to talk about
Mhm.
sustainability towards the environment because I know Phoenix, especially Phoenix Contact USA, has been doing a lot. I think geothermal. I think there's solar. There's a bunch of really interesting things, and we're going to talk about that later this month. Is some of the activities that have been doing. Are you when you're talking to end users, Dave? Are they saying, "Hey, Dave, we need to monitor our power, monitor our energy better, so we know how much we're using. We need to do some sort of generation or co-generation, so something more sustainable." Are those conversations kind of coming full circle back from the triple bottom line you talked about originally?
Yeah, they really are starting to. When we think about these fancy terms like IoT or digitalization, Industry 4.0,
Mm-hmm.
people got caught up in kind of and fell in love with being the smartest person in the room to talk about this kind of stuff and embrace this kind of stuff in a maybe a superficial manner initially, and then they said, well, where's the beef? So now we're to that point. So people are saying, well, how can I improve my process, save energy, so I can save money on my product that I'm producing? So it could be as pedestrian as that. Okay, it's still a very worthy goal. So some people are just looking at it from that standpoint. Other people are looking at it from, I have some marketing capital that I can build, some equity that I can build if I can demonstrate to the world that I'm acting in a sustainable manner. And we see it all around us now. You can hear about it more as kind of a selling point for a company, that we're acting in a sustainable type of way. And yes, that can devolve into nothing more than a marketing message, but hopefully people are getting more attuned to holding people's feet to the fire there. And there's carbon offsets, and you may have seen in the news in the last year or two, there's been some greenwashing going on with that, where maybe
Mhm.
somebody is selling the same forest tract to five different people, and it's not really having the intended carbon offset effect. So hopefully we have the governance in place, or we'll soon have that as a society to winnow through that and make sure that
Mhm.
those games aren't happening. So um, there's a chart that we have, and I'm not going to try to pull it up now, but if you can just picture it in your head, and the audience can as well, of today, 2020-ish to 2050, and imagine a line going from say 65 or 70% at present day, and that's representing the fossil fuel share of energy generation, going down to zero by 2050. Okay, so you got this downward trend there. So we got to make up the energy some way. So one of those is sustainable renewables. So wind, energy, solar, et cetera, et cetera. So say that's going to build from 20% of the overall energy to say 35, 40, 50%, something like that. And then the rest of that's got to be balanced out by power to the X. So these are upcoming technologies like green hydrogen or other type of things like that we're not necessarily going to have a battery in a device, but maybe run it on hydrogen or methane or something that's at least generated in a greenish kind of a way. And then finally, the last way to get us back up to 100%, and actually probably beyond 100%, because our net energy usage may gain by 2050, is actually to reduce it through energy reduction. So look at our processes and make them much more efficient than they are today. So if you look at that portfolio of different techniques to get us to a carbon neutral or carbon positive future, we have to embrace all of them. So one of the ways is energy monitoring today, to enable energy reduction today. And then as we go forward, we'll start looking at doing decarbonization via some of these other techniques like power to the X and some of the other things we talked about. So that's all cool stuff. Energy monitoring has been around for 20, 30, 40 years. There have been various programs and ESCOs, energy service companies, that have cropped up to help other companies to do that. So those all should be part of somebody's energy mindset as they go forth trying to save energy. And whether the motivation is simply to make their products cheaper, make more profit, or to actually do decarbonization, it's all good in my perspective. Um, but the key thing is energy. And the other aspect I'll add on to that is we had that very concern in our own facilities, primarily to pursue the decarbonization goals that we have. So we went about it by, and this is in Germany at actually the factory that makes PLC Next, our flagship PLC product line, among many other things. So our number one consumers of energy there were some plastic injection molding machines and some things that did circuit board surface mount technology, other things like that. And so we said, let us concentrate on the most energy intensive machines first, because that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. And we were able to find that we're already monitoring those machines like crazy for just to maintain the operations of the machinery. So we were able to probably harness all the information we needed for this project, the energy reduction project, from just like 5% of the overall IO count that we had on the machines. So if we had 100,000 IO, we only needed to monitor 5,000 of them to do this whole project. And that
Wow.
was overall. We started much smaller. Um, the cool thing we learned is that when we monitored the energy, we were able to see where the waste was occurring and curtail that and save anywhere between 10 and 30%, depending on the process or the machine, which is fantastic. Okay. That's a
Yeah.
success. You put it in its box and say, we succeeded. But the nice thing about it is when you start adopting digitalization or IIoT as an effective set of tools, you have an architecture whereby you're probably doing like a publish subscribe type of an architecture with your data. And when you're doing it that way, it becomes much easier to democratize that data or share that data with appropriate stakeholders. And so at the outset of the project, we didn't even have somebody who would come in later to the equation, and that was a data scientist. And he all of a sudden took a look at the exact same data that we were already harvesting for energy monitoring purposes. And with his unique set of eyes and skill sets, he was able to look at it and run it through some machine learning algorithms and do some artificial intelligence on it. And through that, was able to see some anomaly detection, detect some anomalies. And through that process, was able to actually improve our process, reduce downtime, increase yield and throughput, and give us about a 10% boost in production that we weren't even really planning on. And it all came from the same source data, and we didn't even really envision that benefit when we started the project. But it just shows you the value of the data, being able to share it with different stakeholders appropriately, through password protection and certificates and all that kind of stuff. um, but then get a different stakeholder with a different motivation and a different looking for different benefits, and could really kind of reuse that same data a second time and get additional benefits out of it.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting point. There's a comment on LinkedIn that makes a really interesting point that says, I'll put it on the screen, but basically that, yeah, a lot of people talk about electricity generation, but not a lot of people speak about driving efficiency, right? Like, so consuming less or using different energy. And it's an interesting angle to focus on sustainability, because I think it's the thing that really can be linked to the bottom line in general. It
Hmm.
can be easily brought up to the board, to the higher management, and explained and understood, and get some support, because especially in industries that are heavy, as you mentioned, I worked a bit with chemicals, and for them that was an extremely huge expense.
Yeah.
And on a huge site, it was extremely hard to figure out where the energy was coming from, because they were reusing the steam from one process to feed another process and things like that. And in, let's say, bulk chemicals, the margins are very low, so energy is one of the best places to start saving. And I think that's probably the most, let's say, efficient way to approach sustainability, at least in the short term, and have these small gains in the short term, because you're not talking about, let's say, like waste management or stuff that are like a bit harder to
Mm-hmm.
put a dollar value on. But energy, I think, is a really good focus on to get people on board to move things forward.
Yeah, I agree, Karim.
Yeah, just a quick question there. So you mentioned that energy monitoring has been there for years. Like we've been collecting data for years. Was there something in the past, let's say 3 to 4 years, something that shifted, that suddenly made something possible in IIoT, that maybe reignited that conversation, made use cases possible, other than the culture shift and the mentality shift? From a technical standpoint, did the hardware evolve in some way, compute or software? Have you seen
Really, really
something like
good
that?
question. Very, very perceptive question, because if I go back 20 plus years ago, I was a power management sales manager with Eaton Corporation. And we had power meters, we had software, and we had communications to transmit it from the meter to the software. Uh, the twin frustrations I had at the time, which was not anything to do with Eaton, it was just endemic to society and the industry, was one, production was king, and production is still king.
Hmm.
And all we could do was pretty much sell it to facilities. And because production was, look, I don't want anything on my machines that's going to potentially interrupt production. Okay,
Hmm.
it's sacrosanct. If you bring me down for 10 minutes, I waste any gain I had in energy, I lose in production, and it's not worth it. And the plant manager is going to fire me, and yeah, you're not going to touch it. So that was one of the frustrations. The other frustration was, back in that era, everything was very much siloed. So you had a dedicated bus bringing the data back to a dedicated server with dedicated software, and it was trapped there. And it was trapped in the hands of somebody who probably had no clout within the organization to really do anything meaningful with it. In many cases, okay, if it's a heavy production environment. Now, if you were talking about a K through 12 uh, school or hospital or something like that, maybe facilities had more sway and they could, say, hey, we're going to turn off the lights now and we're going to scale back the air conditioning now or something like that. So those two things kind of were legacy uh, stumbling blocks, I think, for real industry to treat meaningfully reduce energy usage. So as we move forward through the beginning parts of the Industry 4.0 revolution and the beginnings of IoT, I mentioned earlier, architectures have changed. Before, we had a very rigid automation pyramid that you're all very well familiar with. You had your sensor
Hmm.
levels, PLCs, SCADA level, MES, ERP, blah, blah, blah. And it was very difficult to get data from one level to the next. Might involve several different integrators or different skill sets, or maybe it's
Hmm.
just firewalled off in some way, or perhaps it was stuck not even traversing the higher levels, but just going side to side from department to department. So now that we have things like brokers, things like MQTT for data transport, if once you're in a broker and you can do publish subscribe, now, like I mentioned before with our own instance, we had a data scientist all of a sudden subscribe, whereas prior it was just a production manager or some energy efficiency energy manager perhaps. So now you can very easily facilitate getting data to the right people in the right format in the right time, that they can use it for very vital information that they can hopefully affect the positive change. So put this in a production standpoint. Now, if you're couching it in terms of OEE, how can I keep my machine up and running and more efficient and reduce, increase yield, reduce waste, and things like that? And this all comes as part and parcel of that energy data. And you can at the same time assure production that, we understand this, you own this process, you own production. It's very important. We don't ever want it to go down. but we can more surgically look at this and just stop things when it's appropriate for the process and start it up in a more intelligent way that we have the proper temperature when we need the proper temperature and not 20 minutes before and not 1 second later.
Mhm.
So with the increased sensorization and the ability to share it with the right stakeholders, I think you do have much tighter control and more assurance that production won't be adversely affected, but yet
Mhm.
you're still able to save energy. So that I think those two things I believe are differentiators versus the past.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So I think that I guess before I talk about the application that Dave did, I do want to tease. So Monday, March 27th, we're doing our first live build on Manufacturing Hub. We're actually going to go through the process of building an energy monitoring system to showcase some simple tools that you guys can go leverage yourselves if you would like to go start monitoring energy. So stay tuned for that. We will have an event and a thumbnail up in the next, I don't know, few days, week thereabouts. You guys can come watch as we go through the process of building it. It scares the crap out of Karim, just my concept of it. So if you want to watch the most dangerous thing on the internet, Monday, March 27th, come hang out with us at about 4 o'clock East Coast time. So having said that, I would like to thank Rob for his comment on how not enough people talk about how reducing the consumption of energy is. I think that we will continue to see more of that as energy costs increase. And as energy costs increase, it'll be more and more important. And the concept of saving 10 to 30% of energy costs for those big producers, those are real numbers. Those are thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for facilities, depending upon how large they are. I worked with a specialty chemical facility who had no idea what their bill was going to be. It was like plus or minus 25% was basically budgetary guesstimate at the end of the month. They were always wrong. And just knowing how much they were going to spend based upon some rough calculations was a huge win for them. Much less how can we go optimize that, right? They were about $1 million a month. 30% of $1 million a month is real money if you
Mhm.
guys are in if you guys are into that. And I would like to highlight one of Lewis's comments, right? He said how he loves the use case for artificial intelligence, right? A 10% increase in production that wasn't planned for just off of these energy savings is amazing. And I absolutely think it's amazing. That's almost we started on energy and we backed into production or OEE or any of these other values. When you're talking about, I guess not even you guys, there are very few people talking about data driven sustainability, at least before this show. I would imagine lots of people on the internet will be talking about it after the show. But when you guys are talking about it, do you lead on the sustainability at like energy monitoring, energy savings, and then talk about additional process and business benefits? Are you seeing that is catching on?
It really depends on the organization and where in the organization you're aiming your message. I think executives are really tuned into the sustainability message now.
Mhm.
So I think you can lead a plant manager or an executive with the whole green side of it, the sustainability side of it, decarbonization, net zero, uh, carbon positive. These types of threads are becoming more and more popular because I think increasingly in the U.S. and certainly in Europe, more and more customers are looking to make those types of buying decisions of companies that are acting in those types of ways. In Europe, they have additional legislation,
Mhm.
regulations that are driving it as well. In the U.S., we're probably going to be more market driven, but I think the market is speaking, and so I think that people are really paying attention to these topics at that level. It'll filter down eventually, maybe very shortly, but lower in the organizational hierarchy, if you're talking to controls engineers or perhaps maybe a plant manager or somebody else, they might be more inclined to look at traditional metrics like OEE and process improvements and just reducing cost. And that's completely fine too, as long as it's done in a way that's in accord with these larger threads, like I mentioned before. So, and the good news is when you properly censor things, when you have a good edge gateway and are able to facilitate that data from point A to point B and then share it with appropriate stakeholders, you're able to hit all those boxes. So you can do the OEE improvement, you can do the energy savings, but you can then also aggregate that and show how it's actually impacting the sustainability effort, the decarbonization effort. So it, it's high-minded, but it's actually more possible now than it ever has been in the past, and it's good to see that. A lot of the buzzwords and a lot of this flash and bang from of the this fourth industrial revolution and IIoT and digitalization, all these flashy concepts are actually finally taking hold in a more humble way, but they're serving a larger purpose, in my opinion,
Hmm.
going towards these noble things. And like the UN has sustainable development goals, and those are some of the things that we've kind of patterned our all electric society vision corporately after. And the vision is that one day in the not too distant future, everybody on Earth will have access to affordable energy, and therefore it'll drive economic possibility. So, that's very high minded. It's what we should be doing. And I think if we play it correctly, societally, these are the tools that can help get us to that point, hopefully sooner rather than later. And when I say sooner rather than later, 2035 through 2050 is kind of like
Hmm.
where most people are talking about trying to get to the carbon neutrality aspect. And, with these tools, hopefully we can accelerate and get to that point.
Hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, David, do you have a question specific? I
Well,
felt like you're
so
ready to go there.
I was going to say I'm going to steal Vlad's train of thought and say I have so many questions, but I'm going to let you go ask the next question, Karim, and I'm going to let like the next 30 marinate.
Yeah, I just want to bring it back again to maybe the technology side or more on maybe like a practical side. So, um, let's say I'm medium-sized manufacturer today, looking to deploy some of these things or at least explore
Mhm.
some of these options. The question is, where do I start? Because a lot of manufacturers I know they have a lot of legacy systems. As you said,
Yes.
production is the most critical thing. We cannot stop things. We have a lot of short-term things to attend to. Profit targets to hit, revenue targets to maintain, things like that. We have a lot of legacy technology that maybe doesn't play with this. We don't have the talent in house. You mentioned data scientists, like these people. So, what have you seen work? How should they start? Who they should bring around the table? Where should they go get this type of talent? Should they develop it in house? Should they partner with research institutions? So,
Mhm.
how have you seen it play out in the cases that maybe worked, kind of
Yeah.
were successful?
That great series of questions there. And I should mention, preface this with, depending on which statistic you believe, somewhere between 70 and 80% of a lot of these projects have failed. Okay,
Hmm.
but I believe that was the unfortunate uh, startup phase where people really didn't know what the heck they were getting into. They saw these visions of IoT dancing in their dreams, and they tried to apply stuff that they didn't understand. So I think we're past that era, and I think I always go back to there's a pretty simple way to approach projects like these. One is to try to get executive buy-in, because if you get that, you're going to have a leeway to try some things, maybe fail fast, um, or conversely, if you have success, then you can scale it. Whereas if you don't have the executive buy-in up front, if you have great success in your little corner of the world, good luck scaling that. It becomes a great
Hmm.
one-off, and then you never get any further. So executive buy-in is very important, in my opinion, at the outset. But then I say immediately take your scope and narrow it right down, very, very tight, to a process, a machine, something very approachable and digestible, and try to make it one that's an impactful one. So it's the highest energy user, it's the worst performing uh, uh, link in your chain of what you do, so that when you do have a positive effect, it really materially benefits the company, because that's ultimately what you want to do, is you want to have some material business benefit from whatever you're applying here. So having said all that, the other thing we've really noticed is that the incremental cost to add some of this stuff, as I mentioned before, we found in our own practice, 3 to 5% of the IO we already had was all we needed to really leverage for this data to come forth and give us these insights we needed. So that's not that much. So it's not that much of a cost penalty to add that in parallel to your existing control system. If you're
Mhm.
comfortable with your existing control system, it has effective industrial communication protocol that can use your protocol. Let's say it's already monitoring all the I/O you need, and through that protocol you can get it to an edge gateway. Go for it if you feel comfortable doing. There's absolutely no problem doing that at all. But if you're a little bit reticent about that, it's not that costly to throw some I/O onto an edge gateway and monitor it yourself
Mhm.
and do it completely independent from the process. And that way, the process people hopefully have no trepidation about you moving forward with this. Um, if they're cooperative and say, "Hey, yeah, tap into my existing PLC, pull out some Modbus or some Ethernet IP or Profinet packets, and you know, bring them into your gateway and turn them into MQTT or Sparkplug or something like that. Send it up to the cloud." That's cool too. So that's the other aspect of it. The third or fourth, whatever number I'm up to, the next thing I would make sure I did, and we're gonna have a talk about this on IoT Community on Friday, is to make sure you have a truce between IT and OT in your facility and your enterprise, and recognize that you each bring unique strengths and unique perspectives that can really benefit this if you can work together. I'm not saying it has to be fully converged and you're one big happy group. It could be two groups, but there does need to be collaboration to be successful. I mean, you maybe could be successful in small ways without collaborating, but be truly successful and to have the best outcome you can, you need to collaborate with each other. And a good example I can think of is we put up a demo on an AWS cloud. Happens to be Ignition software, and we have our various different devices talking various different protocols across the internet, and ultimately being displayed in that format. Um, our OT guy was very good. He's a gold certified Ignition integrator in his own right. So he could do all those screens, no problem. He could also configure the firewalls and do all the stuff he needed to do to make sure the data could get out of our building and traverse the internet and all that kind of stuff. He could get onto the AWS cloud and he could set up an EC2, Elastic Compute, and he could do some S3 buckets, whatever he needed to do on the dashboard. He could do that on AWS. But when we got our IT guy involved, DevOps guy, he knows Terraform. He knows best practices from the IT world to do cloud deployments. And he was able to set this all up in code. And now we have the ability to do revision control. We can roll forward and roll back real easily. If there's ever any question, he can go back to the code and see exactly how everything was set up when everything was working perfectly. And it's just incredibly streamlined now that it's up and running, and super stable and
Mhm.
redundant and scalable. And that probably wouldn't be nearly the same way if our OT guy did the whole thing himself. And fortunately, these two guys, Josh and David, had a great working relationship that they really iron sharpening iron over the course of a few weeks of really testing each other's valid assumptions and pushing each other. And they came up with about three different ways of skinning the cat, and then really went back and forth as to which one would be the best and settled on something. And it's been up and running now for 6 8 months, and it's just solid, and it's very scalable. We could just grow it to 100 times its size or 1,000 times its size with no worries. So it was really gratifying to see that when you get cats and dogs playing together, OTIT, there could be really good benefits that come out of it. So I
Mhm.
would make sure that's part of it as well. And the final thing I would say is try to embrace open standards, open protocols, open source software, things like Node-RED, MQTT, Sparkplug, things like this that keep you from being boxed in. If you have a vendor that's got their all encompassing system and you have confidence in them, fine, that go with it. But it could possibly hem you in. Better would be if you're starting out from scratch to try to embrace open things, like I mentioned, publish subscribe architectures, which can be enabled by things like MQTT or Sparkplug. Um, that way, you can send the data many different ways once you get a hold of it and start gathering it. So those are some of the general precepts I would say, and
Mhm.
and then once you do things in an open way, you can find best of breed hardware, software, integrators to help you down that journey and help you with the places that you're maybe not as strong.
Hmm. Yeah, that's those are really great tips, and I saw those play out in different ways too. I saw like part of the failure you described, like 70% of projects fail. I think that's just part of the game. As you say, like anything new, you get a really big hype, usually sold by consultants, and like really nice shiny stuff promising you that you're gonna reach the skies if you do that. And then you have to try to really and trying to figure out for yourself what really works, what doesn't.
Hmm.
I saw that a lot in with machine learning, where they thought that hey, you can just take the data, give it to a machine learning engineer, and they're gonna just find it miracle stuff. And they realize, well, these guys don't really understand the process, and since these processes are very complicated, like they're just shooting in the dark. So they had to find people who actually understood their chemical processes, and so it's a bit of
Yes.
a dance. But as you said, also the key part is to have executive buy-in because they give you that room to work where you're
Hmm.
not really stressed about like every dime, every project and stuff like that. At least they give you a certain mandate of, let's say, hey, we're going to try this for 3, 4, 5 quarters. Here's your resources. Come back to us, whatever. So yeah, I think those all theoretically are great. I think implementing them are much harder, and we can go into each one of them, and it could be a
Yeah,
full episode on how to get those right. Right.
totally agree with that, Karim. And that's why I really advocate that starting small and then failing fast. But that, because you fail doesn't mean you throw it away. It could mean you iterate and you try something a little bit different. And if you have the runway and the permission to do that, um, it's it's good. I see it as very much of an evolutionary thing. So if you start kind of small, kind of manual and hands-on in a lot of ways, having an operator involvement, having a controls engineer involvement, testing things, trying manually a different thing, trying manually a third thing. I think that's really instructive. And then maybe the next evolution is that, hey, let's try machine learning. Now that we've kind of gotten hands-on and tried a few things ourselves, let us try to harness something like machine learning and see what all these thousands and thousands of data points when run through a model, what they can show us that we can't see with our naked eyes. And but I don't wouldn't validate or wouldn't lobby somebody to try machine learning right out of the gate without getting their hands dirty a little bit first to understand the process in a more a deeper type of way.
Mhm.
Because I think you can't really train a machine learning model effectively unless you know something about the process. And so that might be where you really have to get a domain expert on whatever that process is involved more deeply than you might have thought. The machine learning model is not going to be able to do it by itself. You're going to have some kind of expertise to help train that and know what kind of data sets you use for training and for running it and things like that. So I still think it's a hands-on iterative type of thing initially, and that's why you want to start small. You don't want to try to do too much because it'd be overwhelming. But then you learn and evolve pretty quickly, and then you can start to say, hey, we know where machine learning is appropriate. We know how to train the models. We can go from there to the next one. Hey, guess what? We don't have an in-house expertise on this particular process. As things evolve, experts will pop up for machine learning
Mhm.
algorithms for a fermentation process or for this other process that maybe I don't have in house, and maybe we can work with them. Maybe they already developed a library, machine learning library that's resident that could run on an edge or in a cloud that could be harnessed to help those operations. And I guess that's a macro trend I would see moving forward is that there would be this decoupling of having the experts all resident within the organization, that there'd
Mhm.
be more and more of an opportunity for experts to bubble up in different subject matter, whether it be the technology of IoT or whether it be the domain expertise of a certain process or a machine that would create more or less open source content for
Mhm.
others to leverage and to be able to use across different organizations, perhaps if it's not proprietary or trade secret. And in that way, I see it being a lot quicker for us to get the job done. I mean, if I'm a controls engineer and I don't have to reinvent every line of ladder logic, and I can quickly get to, hey, let me plug in this thing off the PLC next door as an example, and let's pull this down from over here, this open source thing, and run it. and then just tweak it and optimize it for our particular process, maybe you can get to the point where you're being efficient much faster than you would have if you had to do it all from the ground up yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think all of those are good points, and kind of back to one of the original statements you made, Dave, as to 70 or 80 or more percent of these projects fail. I think in some part, a lot of the projects and failed were at the very early phases.
Hmm.
But honestly, I think in my experience, most projects fail because we don't know what we want the outcome to be, right? And so if we don't
Exactly.
know what we want the outcome to be, we don't know what success looks like. You go to the end of the project and you're like, was this a success? If you
Hmm.
don't have a matrix or metrics to measure it against, and it's not a shocking success, if you don't do like what you guys at Phoenix Contact Germany were able to do, and save 30% of the power and add 10% of production as a super added bonus, you're like, oh no, it wasn't successful. We overran our budget, we overran our time, we overran all of these things. So I think that those are really good points. I would hope that most of us have learned our lesson in the last handful of years as we go to deploy the project. We haven't, but I would hope that most of us have. And then Rob made a good comment, right? So as an OT person who was brought into IT to help start driving some of these IIoT initiatives, he concurs that we need the collaboration with IT folks, recognizing the strengths and weaknesses, and quickly find someone to complement your skill sets quickly is absolutely important. And I think we've had this conversation over and over again. And it is important to find people kind of cross collaboratively through the organization if you want to succeed. Now, I want to talk about some more successes, maybe dive a little bit into the applications. But first, we have some people to thank. We actually would like to thank Phoenix Contact for sponsoring this episode and this theme. And I don't know if Dave knew what I was getting ready to go talk about, but he has certainly set me up very well. We want to talk about the All Electric Society and how it's revolutionizing how businesses operate by bringing the power of industrial automation to the world. Phoenix Contact is consistently innovating reliable and cost-effective products to streamline production processes and increase efficiency. With AES, businesses can take advantage of high-speed automated production lines and more efficient energy management systems, which can drastically reduce overhead costs and improve overall productivity. Our solutions enable businesses to better meet customer needs and demands and keep up with the competition. The All Electric Society is transforming businesses and driving the future of automation. Open control platforms such as the PLC Next technology combine two worlds of information technology IT and operational technology OT and promise a future of data driven responsibility. PLC Next can access machine analytics remotely and securely, making your business more sustainable. Whether viewed remotely through the cloud dashboards or on prem as a machine HMI, PLC Next can help you find insights that make your factory more eco friendly and efficient. Unlock a sustainable future with data driven insights. Harness your existing analytics to elevate your businesses and propel your plant into the future with secure, safe, and sustainable remote access and monitoring. Transform data into actionable insights and maximize your data for better decisions. And eco efficiency. Now, eco efficiency is a bit of a tough word the first time you go read it, but I've got it the second time. Thank you for throwing the tongue twister in there, Zach. You guys can go to phoenixcontact.com and search out the All Electric Society. They've got some very interesting videos and graphics and things like that in there. And I think they talk a lot about leveraging the use cases that the Phoenix themselves have been doing. Dave, I know you kind of set us up again, either intentionally very well or unintentionally, on the All Electric Society. You seem to know more about it than the rest of us. Do you have any other thoughts that you want to add in?
The term is one which is descriptive. It could be a little bit frightening to some
Mm-hmm.
people. There's a lot of people vested in oil and gas, petroleum, and all that derives from that. And what we're not saying by the term is that we want to do away with that immediately by any stretch. What we're saying is that there will be time in the future, as I started to describe before, when the fossil fuel based fuels will decrease to ultimately zero, the carbon based fuels. So that day might be in 2050, or who knows exactly when that'll be. So the point is, let's use this as a transition time to look forward to that time when more and more things are electrified. Not that everything will be. It might not be efficient to have huge, heavy batteries on every single thing out there. That's where I referenced power to the X and things like green hydrogen and other types of fuels, such as those that might continue to endure for some period of time. So the point, though, is that as we move forward, more and more things will be electrified. We see that evidence every day. If you can't watch TV and see a car commercial without seeing a lot of EV stuff going on, whether it be Chrysler or Stellantis, um, uh, Chevy, GM, Ford, everybody. Not to mention even things like Tesla, etc. So it's a trend that's happening very rapidly. A lot of automakers are saying their fleet will be completely electric by a certain time. So it's clearly a macro trend, and the end game there is not to just electrify everything, but to reduce the carbon footprint. And so we see it as this huge series of mega trends that are all kind of coming together under that umbrella. So you could call it, the, the all electric society. You could call it sustainability, you could call it decarbonization, various different terms that kind of hint at the same thing, that the end game really is to try to get to a point where we are not um, relying upon non-sustainable fuel sources. And so when we get to that time, when we do have the energy and abundance, somebody's having a reconnection issue. Hopefully it's not me. Um, to
I
get to
think
the
we're
point
good.
where things are
We're good.
okay, good. Good. I got that scary message popped up. I hope, hope it's not me. Anyway, when we get to that day, then it'll be a great day for everyone, because the energy and abundance will hopefully help folks that have been frozen out of the progress afforded by readily available energy all over the
Hmm.
world. So that's kind of the North Star of our company, as articulated about 3 years ago by our executive management in Germany for a global kind of purpose statement. And so it was in that spirit that we decided to coin the term. And I think IRA was really key in that term of data driven sustainability. And I think it's a good term because sustainability is the goal. And how do we actuate it? How do we actually get there? And how do we, as people in the industries in which we serve, automation, namely,
Mhm.
how do we bring to bear what we know to that whole equation?
Hmm.
Absolutely. I love that. I think it's a very interesting message. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting message, and certainly there is something there for everyone in order to yeah, certainly there is something there for everyone. I would imagine no matter where you work, sustainability, reduction of energy consumption, all of these things are important. Again, energy, fuel, everything is extremely expensive, especially as we see many energy costs going up significantly last winter for most people. So certainly keep an eye out for that. I guess I've got a two-part question
Mhm.
for you, Dave. We talked about a bunch of different ways to kind of leverage hardware, right? So go leverage IO that currently exists, or maybe we go put a data collector PLC in there. Maybe we go pick a couple of key IO points. Maybe we go put a couple of current transducers on things to go measure
Mhm.
the energy, just with that. So I guess part one and two of the question is part one, what are you seeing, either technology or otherwise, with
Mhm.
customers interested in? And part two is who are you seeing? What is kind of the new breed of integrator, right? Or what are the groups going? Able to go help end users leverage this technology, because it's not just a hardware installation, it's a hardware installation. You have to understand the data, and then maybe we're going to work with a computer scientist or a data scientist of some sort in order to figure out the next levels.
A lot of great questions there. We see a whole portfolio of different folks coming to the fore on this. So you have your what I'd call a traditional Industry 3.0 integrator, control system integrator, that is working their way in an evolutionary manner, as opposed to a revolutionary manner, into this brave new world. And they say, we've done a lot of these things via SCADA over the years. We've done a lot of these things via Ethernet, and before that, different field buses. And that's all true. And so they're able to use some of the actual real world factory floor type of skill sets they developed over their period of operation to bring to bear here. But they're learning some new skills along the way. They're learning how to make these things more maybe like a publish subscribe model of data transmission and the ways that they can handle that. Um, they're sometimes sticking with the IEC 61131 programming languages, ladder logic and structured text. But increasingly, as they hire new folks in, these people right out of college are natively fluent in things like JavaScript and Python and C++ and things like that. So they're slowly evolving into it, and they've got kind of 1.5 feet still in the established world that they've always known, and then are yearning and learning into this new world. And it's effective. I'm not saying it's not an
Mhm.
effective thing. The other thing is you've got a newer breed of integrators. These are typically startups. They maybe tend to be skewed a little bit younger, and they come natively with these higher level programming languages. They might be very well versed in things like Raspberry Pi and Arduino. They probably have a whole killer home automation system that they've self-developed that they're using right now, and they're able to use these same skill sets that they've developed in college or just as a hobbyist and bring it into the world, and immediately are natively dealing with data and understand data as the essence or the currency that's valuable in the whole equation. They come at it with a little bit different orientation, and they really understand that whole data centric aspect of it. So we see those. They tend to be smaller integrators, like I said, oftentimes startups, but there are some larger ones as well. So they're the ones that are very, very comfortable making the leap immediately to cloud or to the edge, whichever one's more appropriate for that potential solution. And so we see both impacting us greatly. And I think if you look at the pie chart of where the business will come from and what will drive it, I think it's going to be an ever increasing um, slant towards the data
Mhm.
side of people. Um, and they're slowly going to be replacing the tried and true ladder logic folks, but they still have a role to play. And the thing I like about PLC Next is that it is an IUC 61131 PLC on the one side, and people can operate in that all day long and not have to do anything high level languages if they don't want to. But if they want to, or if they have another person in their company who's natively good at JavaScript or Python or something like that, they can jump on that side and they can get their programs working together. So it, as much as we say the fourth industrial revolution, there is an evolutionary aspect to it. It's not going to be like turning a switch.
Hmm.
And um, I think that's something that's become obvious by now. Everybody adopts it at a different rate. And I think it's important to recognize that. I think early on, one of the reasons for some of the failure is I think people thought it was possible to digitalize your entire enterprise in one fell swoop.
Mhm.
Like you hand a consultant $1 million and come back in 12 months or 18 months, and all of a sudden you're in this glowing factory that's made out of lasers or something like that. And I was even talking to one of the head guys for manufacturing at
Mhm.
AWS, and AWS might be one that you would expect would be in the camp of let's digitalize everything all at once. But even he said, no, it's very much a iterative. Let's do this process, then that process, then that process, where it makes sense. And you're probably not going to digitalize everything because some things just aren't worthy of being digitalized within an enterprise. So
Hmm.
when I heard him say that in a conversation we were having in December, I said, man, now we're thinking along the same lines. And it surprised me that some mega hyperscaler like that would be thinking along the same terms that we've been talking about here.
Hmm.
Uh, I was going to say, I feel like we've all learned the same lessons, Dave. As much as we'd like to
Mhm.
be able to take that $1 million check or that $20 million check and make everything digital, I have found that very rarely is it the technical coding abilities or even platform abilities most of the time in order to in theory turn everything digital. It's the how do we actually make all of these digital things work, and how do we get the people to go work on the things that are digital. So picking the correct applications, as we've said over and over again, to evolve and pick the high dollar, the high value, the high opportunity applications, get a success, and then be able to move forward with that is important. I
Mhm.
think that
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who is at this point in time of 2023 basically saying anything different. I feel like everyone who has said anything different has learned their lessons and has now backed it up a little bit.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've been trying to give you the opportunity, Dave, but I feel like we should give PLC Next a bit of a plug as to a really good PLC, as to a really good piece of hardware to collect a bunch of the sensor and other data in order to leverage it in energy monitoring or kind of other applications. I guess I will give you the opportunity. I'll give you a bit of the push. Have you seen that working? I imagine that that's what you guys are using internally to leverage some of this. Would you like to talk about that a bit?
Well, absolutely. Thank you for teeing up that softball for me. Um, I'll talk about it from two different perspectives. One is from an energy standpoint. So when we're doing energy monitoring in our own facilities, we either use PLC Next with either Rogowski coils or CTs coming in directly to some IO on board, or we use an energy meter. We make one called EM Pro, and those could be networked via RS-45 or different protocols, Ethernet, etc. And it's interesting what you find out when you start working with real people on the factory floor or facilities, etc. So we didn't have BACnet on our EM Pro, and uh, it's an older, established building management specific protocol. We did have MQTT on it. Okay, so the beauty of MQTT is you could pump it right up to a cloud directly. But and that's great. In some cases, you're going to have to take the sensor and send it directly to a cloud. But in a lot of other cases, you're going to want to aggregate it, and that's where we could either come back to the PLC Next via an Ethernet protocol. But in his case, our facilities management guy, energy management guy, he wanted to do it via BACnet for various different reasons. So that prompted us to start a development project to actually add that into our energy meters, even though it's an older protocol. It's just so I think you got to be sensitive to the fact that you got people at different stages and how they want to approach something. And there might be some really good benefits of aggregating something locally, perhaps in an existing building management system, which uses BACnet, in addition to having these fancy Ethernet protocol or Internet of Things protocols. So that was one quick learning that we had there. And diverging from the energy discussion for a second to talk about PLC Next. And one of the cool things that I saw us do with it, and leveraging both the PLC side and the Linux open side, was there was a frac water application. And with fracking, a huge part of it is to take water, which you have to get from somewhere, which is often like a river, um, and then pump it down into the hole and break up the rock and then extract up the combined water slash oil or gas with it and then separate it and do all the whole process. So the thing is with the water, um, you can only pump it when the conditions are allowable. And so the people who dictate whether that's allowable or not is the U.S. government and specifically the U.S. Geological Survey. The U.S. Geological Survey already has sensors in the rivers, and they have flow rate and they have stage or depth sensors both going on. And so you can't pump out of there unless the conditions are right. So it's got to be enough flow rate and enough depth to actually be allowed to pump out of there. So they don't allow you as the operator to put your own sensors in there. They say, we already have sensors there. You have to go to our website, consult our website. And if it's above a certain value, you can hit the push button on the pump and start it. And if it's not, you got to stop it. And so what we were able to do with the PLC Next was free up the operator from having to do that very manual process by the PLC Next through Node-RED can go out in an API, can go out and actually read the website by itself. The PLC can read the website and say, oh, okay, the river's at a flow rate of 100 feet per second and the depth is 23 feet. that's a go. So the node, so we got that from the API into Node-RED. We stripped out the relevant information we wanted, passed that over to the IEC 61131 traditional PLC side of our PLC Next, where we went through and we did some manipulation there. In this particular case, they had an existing control system with an existing PLC that went to the VFDs to either pump or not pump. They wanted an input to their existing PLC coming in as an analog signal. So we actuated an analog output based on these flow rates and depths to come out of our PLC and into theirs as an analog input to their device. So their PLC thought they actually had a gauge, two gauges sitting in the river reading values, but in reality, we had this PLC next in between, firewalling them off from the internet and doing all this automatic reading of websites, translation, and conversion into an actual analog output. So I thought it was a really cool integration of a lot of different things all happening under the hood of one little PLC.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is a
that's
that is
awesome.
those are yes,
Yeah,
those are both awesome.
yeah.
One, thank you
Yeah.
for sharing, Dave. Two, if you guys would like to know more about PLC Next, take a look at the Solus PLC PLC Next course that Vlad put together
Hmm.
last year. He's got a really good starter course. If you guys would like to get up and running, he takes a PLC Next with appropriate power supplies and everything else, and goes to show you guys how to set those up. I don't think we get quite as technical on the full course as to how do we pull in an API, perhaps turn it to an analog output, connect it to another PLC, and then run everything. But good thing that Vlad is not here. I can commit him to adding that
We will.
application on the next revision. But no, that is an
Yeah.
amazing. That is amazing. Thank you, Dave. I guess the next series of questions that I ask generally start about asking you to predict the future, but I feel like your last application was basically the future is now. So, but you're not going to get off that easy, Dave. What is the future of data driven sustainability of IIoT look like? Is it applications similar to what you just discussed, kind of leveraging on top of legacy technologies? Is it going to be replacing legacy technologies? Is it some combination of both?
Yeah, I think it's really going to be an evolution. Won't be revolutionary, won't turn a switch, but I think as people's eyes are open to what's possible, it's going to kind of become an avalanche of innovation and creativity and getting things done like this. And someday it'll become an expectation that all things are connected. I mean, think about our kids today. There's they can't even really conceive of a time when you didn't have every bit of information that you'd ever want at your fingertips at all
Yep.
time. You know, and I think those types of concepts will work their way into industrial controls and automation that, hey, if there's some data out there that's being gathered by some entity, not even us, but somebody, there's probably got to be an API and some kind of website, some way to get at that data. Weather data, as an example, is a great example. You can easily get that now pulled in via API to any application you want. You don't need your own anemometer up on a rooftop anymore. So I think that's going to become the default mindset, and I think that people who were initially very afraid of cloud won't be afraid of cloud only because they're so used to doing banking and everything else on this.
Mm-hmm.
Now they won't necessarily do everything in the cloud because cost might and latency issues might dictate that they want to do it locally on the edge. And luckily nowadays we can do machine learning and all kinds of stuff on the edge as well. PLC Next has a module that sticks on the side of it that allows you to has um, a massive amount of processing power for machine learning. You don't even need that module to do it right on the CPU of the device for most applications. So you can do it with the machine learning library we have available at our PLC Next store. So machine learning is possible right at the edge. Um, so there's all kinds of different things that people are going to. It's kind of like a cobot. I think of it as automation. It'll be like a cobot. We're going to start thinking of these things as helpers that we work hand in hand with, that, hey, I know something about my process. I know generally where I want to go, but I can't evaluate 1,000 data points per second like this machine learning algorithm can. Let me employ that as a tool to help me make a better decision and do that in rapid fashion. And that'll, I think, become the expectation that people aren't limited to what was humanly possible before, but they're not ceding all control to some kind of machine. That I think there is going to be an increasing comfort factor with I'm using this machine learning as a tool
Okay.
and artificial intelligence as a tool to help me get where I need to go.
Yeah. I think it's going to be like, I think where PLC Next is going, that is key to all of that, is the whole openness. I think openness aspect to it, because you mentioned that example of the with the water, with the flows. Okay, yeah, you were part of that discussion, so you built it, but I'm sure there's like over a thousand specific cases, edge cases in different
Mm-hmm.
industries, and people need access, and like reliable access to something that they can tweak, that they can adapt to themselves. I think that's the first step into making any of this possible. And then I think the next evolution is to make that process even more accessible to more people. So in software, you see that with the no code. So in the beginning was like, hey, like now everything's open source, you can build your own stuff. And a lot of engineers and software engineers build a lot of cool stuff over the years. And then now the next wave is like, hey, let us give the same power to everybody. So it doesn't matter if you're a software engineer, you can still build this machine learning model and train it to do something that you'd like to do. So, but all of that starts, I think, with openness. But I think,
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, it's going to be I think it will be a slow burn, because also like from the specific nature of the automation industry, where you have things running for 40 years. And in software,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sure, some mainframes are still running somewhere, but a lot of these things have been migrated, and migration are easier than to rip and replace a bunch of hardware and like factory
That's right.
floor. So I think due to that nature, by design, that's like the rate limiting factor of like how fast this really can go. But I see that a lot of new facilities are being built with that in mind. So I think like the next wave of facilities, like shortly, like there are going to be like a new wave of facilities that are already built in with all of these functionalities that can move things faster. But I think you guys are definitely like pushing in the right direction, judging by my experience in the software world, let's say, because what I learned from
Mm-hmm.
automation in terms of mentality and openness, you're the equivalent of software in the 90s, where Microsoft just like was
Yeah,
closing everything, and everyone was thinking that open source means you going broke, and like and like you losing all your revenue and stuff like that. So that's interesting. Just want to ask you one question, maybe like again on the practical side, because I know when it comes to sustainability, so the big dilemma is that you ha- you have you have some short term, I would say, like investments that could be perceived as like costs, as like something that is maybe not good for the bottom line in the short term, and you kind of need to balance that with the long term vision and stuff like that. So I was wondering, are there maybe like government grants, specific programs, something like that, where let's say small, medium manufacturers can look up to, can go and get maybe some funding, some financing, some help to kickstart some of these projects, to take some risks without
mm-hmm.
hurting their financials? Because
Yeah,
especially with right now with the looming financial crisis, maybe some people are more hesitant to like put money in there. But I'm sure if they could get it from somewhere, that would help a lot moving some of the initiatives.
absolutely. Yeah, Karim, there's a lot of state level
Mm-hmm.
programs that are offering small to medium sized manufacturers specifically funds up to 25 or $50,000, depending on the state, to adopt these types of concepts and to put them into
Mm-hmm.
practice. And it can cover hardware, software, some integration effort, and in many cases, 25 to $50,000 is certainly enough to automate a process or a machine or some equipment. So it's very much worthwhile, and that can help defray costs. It can either be cost sharing or just a straight up grant. So I would start with the state level things. Check out the economic development of the state that you might be in. There's also an organization called SESME, which is part of the Department of Energy. It's a Smart Manufacturing Institute. It's a public-private partnership
Mm-hmm.
that we are involved in as well. And they have a lot of different centers where they can train workforces. They can help people adopt these concepts. Uh, we were at one in New Kensington, Pennsylvania, a few weeks ago. A colleague of mine will be up at one in Troy, New York, at RPI in a week or two. So these are out there too to really assist not just with the practitioners of the automation, but also like high school kids that are looking to get into from STEM into the actual world of operating these types of um, systems in the future,
Hmm.
and helping workforces to become educated in how to use it. So there are a lot of resources out there and that are just looking to be tapped into and can be very beneficial in jumpstarting people's and they're aimed at small to medium manufacturers
Hmm.
typically. Not to say larger folks can't leverage it, but small to medium is really their sweet spot that they're looking to help.
Hmm.
Absolutely, all really good. I will also throw out MEPs, manufacturing extension partnerships. Also, very good if you are looking to, if you are an end user or manufacturer looking to manufacture things, looking for help to go find funding and other things. Do a lot of grant writing. I've worked with a number of them that are able to leverage a bunch of those grants very well. But that was a fantastic list. Thank you, Dave. I guess we love to ask for career advice. I should probably the conversation has gone a little bit all over the place in a good way. So let me be a bit more specific. Dave, if you're looking to talk to a kind of an early, maybe mid-career person looking to get into IIoT, looking to get into this sustainability and the data-driven sustainability, what sort of career advice do you have for one of these people?
Well, I noticed somebody popped up in the chat, Francisco Alcala, and I don't want to embarrass him, but I will use him as an example. He took it upon himself to look, he just popped up there. So he took it upon himself to recognize that machine learning and AI are hot topics. So he found a college curriculum. I think it was University of Texas. Don't quote me on that. He could probably correct me if I'm wrong. That offered a certificate or perhaps a degree in that discipline or those disciplines. So um, he embarked on that. Now he is actually a domain expert on a lot of things water wastewater related to process wise. So he's actually applying these concepts to a couple different processes, and it could be a game changer for the efficiency of these different processes. So I guess long and short there is there's never been a better time to, if you're self-motivated, to find information, whether it be through YouTube or through things like you mentioned before with Solus PLC, with their introductory course on PLC Next. There's a lot of information out there that you can harness and leverage and learn about. It might even be in your university type thing, but try to just find that little niche that you have an interest in that you can take the next step and just get a little bit sharper than the knife in the drawer next to you. Get a little bit of an edge on those folks and jump in there and start to apply your knowledge. It might even be home automation. You
Hmm.
might be an enthusiast, a hobbyist. Jump into that. You learn a lot about protocols. You learn about gateways. You learn about different real world concerns that you might have, distances, ranges, and so forth. And if you can follow those things, I think the passion will lead you. And the farther you get and the more people you network with, that's the other key thing is networking with folks through organizations like this. You can get a few people into a room and really start the innovation happening a lot faster than you might be able to solo. So people who are tuned into this right now, I think that's a big step in the right direction. Not because of my content, but just by the fact that you're amongst a whole bunch of other folks that are interested in similar content and can work together collaboratively to kind of further that whole thing. So I think an openness, a curiosity, and then some pursuit of what interests you with as a subtopic within these things will start leading you to the right path and get you where you need to go. It's such a wide open world right now that if you get started early, and like Francisco did with some machine learning, it's going to bode well for you in a few years.
Absolutely. I think self learners over and over again, we hear positivity in self learners, and that I think is very good advice to anyone, regardless of where you are in your career and regardless of any sort of industry that you're looking to be in. So thank you for that, Dave. We always like to ask people for book recommendations, and I know that you've got a slightly different book recommendation than we normally talk about. So can you walk us through that?
I love to read. Now, I haven't read much because I've been writing a book for the last 6.5 years. It has nothing to do with IoT. It's I live in Cleveland. I've been here 20 plus years, but way predating that, when I grew up in New York State, somehow I was a Browns fan, Cleveland Browns fan.
Oh,
They've been
so it's a
terrible for a
sad
long
book.
time.
Yes.
Yes. It's the working title is The Curse of the Cleveland Browns. So it's a historical fiction. So all the football is real, and then there's a story woven around it, a fictional story of how the curse was, you know, made upon them and what precipitated that, how it's playing out. Like I said, I've been working on it for 6.5 years. I can't wait to be done with it. I'm getting close. Um, so that's kind of kept me from reading a lot of books. Now, the one book I read most recently, I was on a plane. I forgot my AirPods. I didn't have the right kind of connector to plug in traditional old fashioned earplugs.
Yeah.
I had no other reading material. My wife is a tutor for this little fourth grade girl, and she happened to have the book that that girl was reading. It's called I Survived. It's a series.
Okay.
And I don't know if any of you have young kids, but so I'm out of boredom. I decided to read this book, and it was really good. It was about the Revolutionary War,
Okay.
and the author. I read the afterword, and she said it's such a big topic. So she picked one battle, and it was one I'd never heard of: the Battle of Brooklyn. That's in
Okay.
Brooklyn, New York. It was a big pivotal. I think it was the largest single battle during the war. And what was so good about it is it put it in such poignant human terms that you couldn't help but learn a lot just because of the compelling story. And it was written about a little boy um, that basically became a soldier by default, by accident, and all the things that happened. So um, if you have kids and they're in like the second, third, fourth, fifth grade era, which mine are well past that, but if they are, this would be probably a dynamite way to get them very interested in history because it's not dull, dry facts on a textbook page. It's a living story and it's a quick read, but it's not a. It's one that, well, I was frankly surprised by the depiction of death and harm and injury for such a young audience. Okay, not that it was gory, but it didn't spare those details, but it didn't also condescend to the it did not condescend to the readers. And in the afterward, she mentions a lot of other books that they could read if they're further interested, and these are like by esteemed historians that are written for an adult audience. So it's kind of a good starter kit for kids to get interested and really kind of feel like they're living that and really have a visceral knowledge of it more so than a boring put me to sleep textbook. So
Interesting. I think that this is the first in process self written historical fiction book that we've gotten. I'll make a note to Vlad. Vlad is not a sports fan. The Cleveland Browns are an American football team, Vlad.
yes,
Vlad's not here. Otherwise, I would have made that distinction for him. Vlad is not a big sports fan. Sports analogies are not this not the strong point of this show. But no, I think that is very interesting. As a longtime Buffalo Bills fan, I feel your pain, Dave.
yes.
Having said that, I think that this is also the first time that we've had a children's book recommended, and as just about as interesting as most books that we get recommended. I think that there will certainly be some googling and looking into that. Maybe not the children's book, maybe some of the recommendations beyond that. So thank you
Yes.
for that. And then last question we have for you is who should reach out? Who do you want to connect with, have conversations with? Are you looking for end users to talk about data-driven sustainability applications? Or is Phoenix Contact looking to hire? Kind of our open soapbox to you to for us to thank for our listeners to thank you and see if there are opportunities to continue the conversation on their side.
Yeah, we'd love to talk to end users, but we really need good integrators to kind of precipitate that relationship. And so anybody who's got the need, reach out to me, reach out to anybody else at Phoenix Contact that you may know, and we'd be happy to discuss any of these topics or others.
Absolutely. That has been amazing. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everyone, for coming to hang out with us on a Wednesday afternoon. If you guys are still listening, please hit that thumbs up button. Please hit the subscribe button. Hello to everyone still watching us on Solus PLC. If you guys are listening to us in podcast format, please rate us 5 stars. Please hit the subscribe, follow button, download the podcast. Karim normally doesn't listen all the way through, so he doesn't realize that I say this all the time, but he does see the metrics saying when Dave remembers to request people to like, subscribe, and follow along, more people like, subscribe, and follow along.
They do.
I'm just I'm just as surprised as everyone else that you have made it to the end. But no, thank you, everyone. If you guys are watching on LinkedIn or YouTube or any of those places, you have myself. You probably don't have Karim's contact information, but we can put that up there. You guys have Vlad's contact information, and Dave is also there on his LinkedIn profile. If you guys are listening in podcast format, this and hopefully all of the applicable other pieces of information are in the show notes. Maybe we've leveraged machine learning to go get these in the show notes by the time this episode comes out. Please come hang out with us Wednesday afternoons if you want to watch the live show, have your questions answered, and then we are generally in your earbuds Thursday at some point, which is about as good as we can commit to at this point. But we are looking to get better every week. But no, until next week. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.